Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Educate webinar this week. My name is Liana, and I'm the community manager here at Saros, and joined with me to host today's wonderful webinar is Mary, our content lead, and Alexa, our senior customer success manager on the publishing and agency team. Throughout today's webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A box, and Mary and Alexa will answer them at the end. But with that, I will pass it over to Mary to get started.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Liana. Excuse me. Hi, everybody. Give me a minute while I share my screen, something I love saying in remote work. Can you guys see my presentation? Okay, great. All right. So thanks again, Liana, for the great introductions. As Liana said, I am Mary, and I lead the content here at Saros, which means I spend a lot of time thinking about how not just to create content, but how to connect that content to strategy and execution. Alexa works really closely with our publishing clients, helping them bring their ideas to life and make sure their content, really lands with their audiences.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So in my role, I get front row seat to how publishers and media brands are experimenting with new content formats, where some of them struggle to bridge the gap between what they want to say and what their audiences actually need. So that's why I'm excited to be here today. Mary and I are going to share some of the common challenges we see and show you some real world examples of how brands are overcoming those challenges with interactive, tailored content that drives results. And we'll even bust a few myths along the way and showcase how you can reframe them to move forward with more confidence and strategic alignment.
Awesome. Thanks for that context, Alexa. And before we dive in, I do want to ground us in why this conversation matters. At Saros, we actually ran a quick survey on our target audience segments between marketers and designers, and we found that only 38% of the marketers we surveyed said they feel confident that their content's actually resonating with their target audience. And this happens all over the town. Like in client conversations, we hear the same theme over again and again. One prospect even told us our pitches aren't visually representing our story well enough, which is really, to me, such a clear example of that disconnect between what we know internally and how it shows up externally. So that's what we're really here to talk about today, how to close that gap and how to really understand your audience and then translate it into that content that connects. So from a high level, here's how we'll spend our time today. First, I'm going to set the stage, talking through some of the biggest challenges we hear from marketers and content teams. Then I'll share how we at Saros approach that problem internally, including the role data and feedback loops play in making sure our content resonates. And then finally, Alexa's going to bring us into the client perspective, showing how some of Saros's own customers are tackling those same challenges in their own work. So we hope by the end today that you walk away with practical ideas that you can bring back to your own content strategy. So whether you're just getting started or maybe you're sharpening what you already have, already thinking ahead to 2026, hopefully this will give you some ideas. So first things first, why is it that tailoring content is so challenging right now? First, attention is harder than ever to earn. This is something that I'm sure everybody in this call probably can agree on. We know that you can publish content, but right now, so is everyone else. So standing out from other brands right now is the hard part. And secondly, some formats that teams rely on, let's say static PDFs, these formats just aren't trackable. So that makes it really tough to know whether your audience is engaging or ignoring your content, which leads us, of course, to the bigger question. How do you know the content you're producing is actually what your audience wants? Like what formats resonate or what channels matter? What language actually really connects and gets your message across in the right way? So the answer in our experience really lies at an intersection of research, data, and iteration. So you can't just guess once and hope you nailed it. You have to keep listening, testing, and refining. So I want to kick this off by sharing a framework that we use to make sense of the most common challenges we see, something we call the 4 disconnects. So the first challenge is what we call the attention disconnect. Marketers and designers, again, creating more content than ever before, but again, so is everyone else. So what we find here is when you're facing this disconnect, that interactive trackable formats that actually earn and hold attention is really the best way to cut through that noise and stand out. The second is the audience disconnect. creating content without a clear understanding of what the audience actually needs. For example, a senior manager in advertising told us that even when their team produced really visually stunning and impressive work, it didn't consistently perform better than their simpler content. So the disconnect here wasn't really about effort, it was about impact. And if this you find is happening in your own content strategy, we find the best solution really is grounding your work in the voice of the customer. And what I mean by that is just pulling directly from the ways your audience talks about their challenges and goals. So something that I personally do in my role is maybe I'm not interfacing or interviewing customers directly, but I'm reviewing a lot of like sales calls, either with prospects or current customers. We'll send out surveys, or of course, we'll also get feedback from sales conversations. So once you start to get some of those insights, you combine them with your ideal customer profile to tailor content that mirrors their language and priorities. And this way, you're using their words and addressing the problems that they've already told you matter, and your content feels like it was built for them, not for everyone. The third barrier is the resource disconnect. And this I feel like is a common challenge across teams. Even when teams know what they should do, might not have the bandwidth to pull it off. For instance, one marketing leader in SaaS told us he's managing 10 websites in 7 languages alone, while also running social. And that's the reality for a lot of teams. Good intentions, but limited capacity. So that's why we really recommend leaning on reusable, scalable templates. And what I mean by scalable here is that you take one really strong design or content framework and adapt it quickly across campaigns or channels, so you don't have to start from scratch each time. For instance, let's say you start with a single interactive report template. This could be repurposed into multiple client case studies. It could be localized for different regions, even, adjusted for social snippets to share out on your social channels, all while keeping that quality and brand consistency intact. So it's about multiplying impact while reducing that production lift that can be such a barrier for a lot of teams. Last but not least, we have the results disconnect. So teams put in tons of effort, they put in weeks of effort, but it's hard to tell sometimes if that content is actually moving the needle. So of course, the fix here would be building in analytics and feedback loops. This way, you can see what's resonating, refine based on real data, and make sure your work has measurable impact. So those are the 4 disconnects that we typically see: attention, audience, resources, and results. And they're really universal. So whether you are focused in tech, whether you work in publishing, healthcare, or any other industry, these are the same challenges that we do hear from clients and prospects come up over and over again. And how we're tackling these challenges at Seros isn't just by guessing. We're trying to stay as close as possible to our customers. So combining behavioral data with real voice of customer insights to understand where are people getting stuck and what they really need from us. So that's just a concept, right? Let me show you how we put this in practice. So one of the biggest challenges we hear from our customers all the time is, where do I even start? Blank canvas syndrome, especially when creating content, that can be really real. And even the most creative marketers and designers can freeze up when they're staring at an empty page. So earlier this year, we heard our customers and we wanted to help. So we launched a weekly template initiative to roll out brand new templates weekly, obviously. Some of you on this call may have even gotten some emails from me about this. But it's rolling out brand new templates to give users ready-made starting points. But again, we don't just want to create a bunch of templates and call it good. We want to make sure that we're giving people the templates that they're going to get the most value out of, the types of content that they need to create, and that we know we can help make it a little bit easier for them if we get them the right template. So that was the challenge. How do we make sure the templates we're producing are the ones our audience or our users need the most? Enter the feedback loop. So to answer that question, we built an iterative process based on usage data, customer insights, and internal insights. So with usage data, we started by tracking usage. So each week, I look at 2 signals. I'm probably going to do it after this call. I look at imports, so how many times a template's been pulled into user accounts, and then weekly usage. So how many people are actively working in that template week after week. And combining these metrics together gives us a really clear, powerful picture of which templates have ongoing value versus those that maybe just spark curiosity or, serve as a source of inspiration. For instance, our template that has a one-pager format, this has been imported the most as of today. I'm making it our top performer. But when I look at weekly usage, a landing page that features an infographic component, that actually leads with dozens of users returning to it consistently. So this tells me that this isn't just being tried out, it's actually being used and it's being relied on, and signaling we want to double down on that. And then finally, voice of the customer, internal insights, sales calls help explain the why. So listening to calls, we heard repeated asks for formats like one-pagers, pitch decks, and RFPs, and that validated what we were already seeing in the usage data. It really helped us double down on templates we knew would resonate. So finally, we also want to make sure our customer-facing teams had a say. So our design team sent a survey to sales and customer success, just asking the simple question of what templates do your customers ask for most often? So the responses from our frontline teams that are interfacing with our customers all the time, that reinforced the need for industry-specific templates, and really gave us confidence to focus our next batch on ICP relevant formats like fintech-focused land pages, healthcare-focused landing pages, and even interactive RFPs. So from that first batch of 8 general use templates that we started out with earlier this year, things like reports and landing pages and content hubs, we've since refined our strategy. And in our second batch, we really leaned into format demand and also industry demand. So we're already seeing stronger adoption rates with these newer templates because they're hitting closer to the core needs of our ICP. Even from this very simple graphic we've got here, just to illustrate that when we checked in on the campaign in July, usage was really heavily concentrated across 3 reports or 3 formats. The creative report and pitch deck templates were really driving the majority of activity, but also they were really mostly being used by a smaller set of repeat users, which is valuable data, right? We know these templates are offering value to that set of users. However, by September, the story looked a lot different. So our one-pager template had risen to the top in popularity, and then newer formats were starting to gain traction. And what's really even more important here is that adoption was spread across more unique users. So showing that the formats that we had chosen to go with this round of templates, they were resonating with a wider slice of our customer base. And that's the real story here, that this isn't just about specific templates, but really about that process behind it. So combining behavioral data, using insights from our customers and frontline team feedback, we built an approach that's iterative, it's measurable, and most importantly, it's customer driven. And that's really what tailoring content looks like in practice. Not guessing, but listening and then using those insights to create with confidence. So putting it all together, you've got 2 lenses. You've got the behavioral data, what people actually do with content, and then the voice of the customer, what people say they want and how they talk about it. And one other thing I wanted to touch on before I hand this over to Alexa so we can look at some awesome client examples. It's not just about identifying formats here, it's also about speaking the customer's language. For example, a creative director might say they need a starting point or inspiration, whereas a CMO is more likely to talk about speed to market or ROI. And both are pointing to the same need, but if you echo those words back to them in their content, they're going to realize that we're speaking directly to them. So personally, nothing fancy. I keep a running notes in a Google Doc of phrases and priorities I hear from different roles. Simple practice, but whenever I'm creating content for these ICP profiles, it allows me to really be more efficient and make sure that content is tailored to them using words that they use themselves to either describe their problem or, what they'd like to do. So whenever you're creating targeted content, you really want to make sure you're balancing that data with the human voice. This will allow you to close the loop and create content that feels actually tailored. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Alexa so we can see what this looks like for our customers.
Awesome. So we've talked about the challenges marketers face and the framework for overcoming them. So let's take a look at what that looks like in action. The first example that we're going to walk through is Her Campus. So this is an interactive report which is a standout example of branded editorial that truly resonates. Her Campus partnered with First Response to connect with Gen Z audiences while balancing authenticity, brand alignment, and audience insight. Her Campus has a very engaged audience of Gen Z students and young professionals navigating major life decisions. So when you're creating content for this group, you can't just share information. You have to guide them through moments of uncertainty with experiences that feel personal and actionable. This My Next Step experience, it was designed to do exactly that, give users a way to interact, explore, and walk away feeling like they have a plan. And this content didn't just land, it hit the mark with their audience. Her Campus saw huge reach, even more importantly, strong repeat daily visitors. So what that tells us is it wasn't a one and done visit. Users kept coming back because it spoke directly to their needs. And on top of that, it wasn't just about page views. Users clicked, interacted, and followed outbound link clicks, showing this experience wasn't just interesting to read, it actually drove next step actions. And that's the kind of impact that you want when you're creating content designed to move someone along their journey. So another thing that really excited the team, traffic patterns suggested organic discovery and community-driven sharing. So it wasn't just Her Campus promoting this experience, their audience shared it with each other, and that's the kind of cultural stickiness that's gold, because that means that your content has a life beyond your initial campaign. So this is a perfect example of closing some of those disconnects Mary outlined earlier. It captured attention with an interactive, trackable format, and it reflected audience insights, speaking directly to Gen Z's needs and language. Moving to our second example, this is from Morning Brew. They created this Cannes customer report with a very specific audience in mind. It was potential advertisers and brand partners. Their goal wasn't just to share survey results, it was to showcase their speed, creativity, and ability to turn around real-time audience insights into a polished, highly engaging deliverable. So from survey to launch, the report itself took an entire just 24 hours. They used Seros then to take it a step further, creating this interactive, trackable digital version that truly brings the data to life, which perfectly addresses the attention disconnect. So turning static survey results into something interactive and engaging, and the resource disconnect, showing how Seros helps teams move fast without sacrificing quality. So from a delivery standpoint, the report was gated behind a paywall, meaning every single visit represented high value engagement with Morning Brew's most relevant advertisers and stakeholders. And for Morning Brew, it's a repeatable playbook. With Seros, they can create digital reports on demand, a scalable way to strengthen relationships while continuously demonstrating the power of their brand. So what both of these examples show is that tailored content isn't just about knowing your audience, it's about building with intention. So whether you're guiding young professionals through life decisions like Her Campus, or unpacking industry trends like Morning Brew, the same principles apply. You want to create interactive, trackable experiences, leveraging data and iterating on that to build a system that scales. So now that we've covered some of the biggest challenges teams face and some real customer examples, I want to shift gears and talk about some of the common beliefs that we hear often when working with clients across verticals. The tricky thing is that these beliefs, on the surface, they sound right. They've been repeated so often that they almost feel like facts. But when you dig deeper and challenge some of these beliefs, you realize that they can actually hold teams back from building truly tailored, effective content strategies and also impact your view of success. So we're going to play a little game of myth versus reality. I'll share a statement we hear a lot, and we'll break down if we feel that's actually true, and ways in which you could rethink them to change your approach to content creation and measurement. So the first being that templates limit creativity. So from our perspective, this one is interesting because, or at least my perspective, clients usually fall into two camps. Camp A is all in on templates. They see templates as a way to scale content creation, drive efficiency, and keep up today with today's fast-paced market. And templates give them that consistency and speed, especially for repeatable initiatives that happen multiple times a year. Camp B, they love fully customized content. They view Seros as a completely blank canvas where they can build bespoke, high-touch experiences that reflect their brand's personality and differentiate them from their competitors. Here's the thing, both approaches are valid. There's tremendous value in custom one-of-a-kind builds. There's equally strong value in having templatized, repeatable formats. I think the key is really just being strategic about when to use which approach. I, of course, recommend a hybrid model, putting your creative energy into building something custom and robust for flagship initiatives like brand launch, annual reports, or key editorial moments. That's where bespoke design really shines. And for ongoing campaigns or content you produce repeatedly, like seasonal promotions, monthly reports, you can lean on templates because they have these modular components. You could even Frankenstein templates together, swapping them out sections and visuals so that things look and feel fresh without reinventing the wheel every single time. And an often overlooked benefit, templatizing can actually increase audience engagement, because when your audience starts to recognize a format, they intuitively know how to navigate it. So that familiarity builds trust and keeps them coming back because they know what to expect. So to sum it up, whether you're building fully custom or working from a template, both strategies are powerful. I would just encourage you, if you haven't explored templates, that you reconsider, because with the right approach, you can create experiences that feel and look custom while taking advantage of speed and efficiency that templates provide.
I love that point, Alexa. And one thing I'd even add too is just that templates don't have to mean one size fit all and can really be useful for personalization. So, say you've got one customer segment that really prefers like dense text versus one that enjoys more visually driven stories. You can build those variations directly into templates, like content formats that you're commonly giving to this audience. Pre-build those templates to have those needs in the functionality of the piece itself, so that you're tailoring, without starting from scratch every time. And also, templates can help with reuse, and kind of help you get out of the mindset of treating every asset like, a one and done project, and more so thinking about, how can I repurpose this across channels? How can I reuse this for another campaign by swapping in new visuals, copy, or modules, while keeping everything intact? So I think that's where templates can also, be like a real efficiency play as well, where they help you operationalize that personalization factor and get more mileage out of content that you're already creating anyway.
Exactly. So the last myth is that the second is longer time spent equals better performance. So here's why we believe that can be false. So we do know that people don't read content word for word. They scan, especially online, and that's not a bad thing. It's how most of us process information quickly across different devices. If you design strong navigation, for example, and that helps your audience get to where they want to go as fast as possible, that's a win, even if they only spend 30 seconds in your experience to get there. So yeah, rich immersive editorial pieces can drive higher engagement and longer time spent, especially if you're layering in best practices like interactive visuals, quizzes, modular content that allows users to explore on click or hover. Those experiences naturally invite people to stay and play. But the nuance is, a short visit doesn't mean failure. If your goal is to, for example, you want your audience to take a quick quiz, and then that's going to click through to some other landing page, a 45-second visit that ends with a quiz complete is the success, right? The KPI there isn't time spent, it should be completion rate. So what really matters is matching content execution to your primary success metric. So longer time spent only matters if depth of exploration is the priority. If efficiency and action are the priority, then shorter time spent with strong engagement can be very powerful.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think this is also where we can remind ourselves as marketers that, sometimes we need to contextualize results for our stakeholders. And like Alexa was saying, every piece, depending on where it falls in the funnel, is going to have a different goal. So it's not just reporting a single KPI like time spent. You really want to connect that metric to the strategy behind the piece. And if the content accomplished the action it was designed for, like they filled out a quiz within 45 seconds, I would say that's successful. So that's really the lens that you want to use when evaluating performance. And then I'll take us Oh, go ahead, Alexa. Sorry.
No problem. I was just going to say our last myth is more content equals better results.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm sure everybody can probably guess at this point what we're going to say, which is we would say that's probably false. And I think that, yeah, this is something that you see a lot talked about right now. Our CEO, Allison, on her podcast, The Engagement Principles, was actually just talking about this, and it really resonates with what we see from thought leaders right now. We've really just hit a turning point where the traditional playbook just doesn't work the way it used to, especially AI is making it so easy to churn out a lot of quick content. So the internet is just full of noise right now. So really the question is becoming, what does successful content look like when everything feels the same? And I know this isn't a very glamorous answer, but from my vantage point, it's pretty clear that you still need to bring an original perspective combined with that strong visual storytelling to stand out. That's what's breaking through right now. And this is where we find that interactive content is that strategic differentiator because, you know, if your competitors are still pushing out like static content, having something that's dynamic and engaging from the start and trackable, that's really what's going to set you apart. So pay attention to execution, make sure that these pieces that you're putting together are also, you know, they've got a beautiful design, but we also want to think about the user experience, you know, make sure it doesn't have broken links, no broken images, anything that would contribute to that clunky UX. So I would say quality today isn't just the idea, but how seamless, you know, that delivery feels for your audience. And finally, for the SEOs we have in the room, we know Google's EAT guidelines are pretty clear. We don't want to be writing for engines, especially with how much AI has shaken up search, for example. We want to be writing for people, the human on the other end of the screen who will be looking at your content. So tried and true tactics, you know, maybe it's time to try something new, while also just keeping that genuine human perspective at the core. So the play isn't volume, it's fewer, more intentional pieces that bring originality, that bring great storytelling, and are also thoughtfully designed with the user experience in mind. I think that would create the real impact.
Awesome. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on is that one of the biggest challenges we've talked about today, the resource disconnect, knowing exactly what you want to create, but not having the bandwidth to bring it to life. Obviously, at Ceros, we understand those challenges. That's why we've built tools and resources designed to feel like an extension of your team, so you're never starting from zero. So the first resource I want to highlight is our asset library. So this acts as a central home for all your brand assets. Think of it as a plug and play system. Your team always has ready to go on brand elements at their fingertips, keeping content consistent and production time low. Next is our design hub. So this kind of builds on the asset library as it has pre-built modular experiences that are like digital building blocks you can mix and match and customize. It is really a game changer from a scalable personalization standpoint to help tailor content without reinventing the wheel each time. We also have strategy offerings. So we do have in-house strategists that we partner with you and with your team as well as them, and we can provide design, UX feedback, workflow optimization, and build efficiencies. Then there's also our Inspire site. So Inspire houses real client examples and a growing library of Ceros templates, which we've spoken at length about. So these templates are perfect when you need inspiration or quick starting point, whether you use them as is or remix them, as we've mentioned before. It's all about accelerating your path to launch so that you can focus on the message and the audience and not just the build. And to keep you supported, our in-studio chat connects you directly with our support team for real-time help. They can jump right inside your project and answer any questions along the way. Finally, Educate, which is our knowledge hub. It's packed with how-to content, past webinars, weekly live sessions, from platform trainings to design skill building. All of these resources work together to help you bring your ideas to life every step of the way. With that, I'll hand it back to Mary.
Awesome. Thanks, Alexa. Thank you so much also for going over those resources. Always good to have a reminder. And again, check them out if you're a Ceros customer. They're really, really helpful for just helping you get started or, refining what you already have. But that does bring us to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've covered a lot. So one takeaway we could leave you with, it would be building tailored content isn't about guessing, right? It's about listening, iterating, and giving your teams the right systems to bring ideas to life. So we hope we gave you a few practical ways to do that. And we are excited to see what you create next. And again, if you are a Ceros customer who needs a little bit of help, feel free to reach out. We've got our client strategists, we've got our customer success managers, we've got our wonderful Educate team who are always willing to help. So don't be a stranger.
Thank you both so much, Mary and Alexa, for sharing all of those valuable insights into, understanding your audience and how that can really shape for stronger and more engaging content, and also showing some client examples and all the resources you guys just provided. Super, super helpful. And it does look like we have a couple questions here in our Q&A. And if anyone has any questions as we're going through those or through these, definitely make sure to send them in the chat window. But our first question here is, how would you recommend balancing content for different roles when they care about different things?
I can take this one. A really good question. So I think the way at least I would go about something like this is you want to start with a general foundation first and then tailor it from there. So I talked a little bit about language, paying attention to the language that your customers use earlier in this presentation. So I think this is where that research would really come into play. So when I'm working on a piece of content and say it's for a couple different audience segments, I usually draft the content first as kind of like not generic necessarily, but this is a general version of what we want to put together. And then from there, start to layer in terms and phrases that specific roles actually use. So helping it feel a little bit more natural and audience specific, but also, gives me a way to not write inside a box from the start. So, even just like, it doesn't have to be a complete teardown of the content as well. It might just be something as simple as swapping out headlines with just a few, few verbs or adjectives that they use a lot, your audience uses a lot, or, speaks to their specific pain points. So sometimes it's just the smallest edits that make the most impact.
I love that. Another question here is, how can we measure whether our content is actually resonating beyond just the page views?
Well, I guess I would say, just to kick us off, kind of what Alexa said earlier in this presentation, obviously page views are a great metric to track, but they can be just the surface. So resonance, I think, shows up in different ways. A lot of the content work that I do also focuses on organic SEO. So backlinks, getting backlinks from, authoritative, trustworthy sources. This signals to others that your content is authoritative. This signals to search engines that it's authoritative. So that's one way to, be able to tell that you're actually seeing some success. And then also, some qualitative signals when sales teams are using the piece in conversations, because it actually helps move deals forward. If that was the goal of the piece, then I'd say it's working pretty well. And then you can also, look at the depth of the engagement, seeing if how far they're clicking into it, if they're returning. So again, it's maybe kind of a mix of like those harder and softer signals, but I think all those together probably give you a clear picture of what's actually connecting.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the only thing they'll add is, speaking about more than just page views. So I often get the question from clients of how to increase engagement. But in some scenarios, really what they are looking for is time spent. And what is important, like we've talked about, is aligning on what those KPIs are. So defining your primary KPI, and that should guide you on your structure and how you, structure content and user flow. So if engagement and time spent are a priority, you want to keep users immersed in the Ceros experience and make exploration easy, versus if your goal is, we want to drive traffic, you want to focus on clear outbound navigation and prominent CTAs.
Yeah, I like how you both said, there's kind of multiple different ways to look at it depending on what those important KPIs are. And also, Mary, like you said, is this content being shared? Is the sales team using it often? Where are we seeing it being used? And the more, of course, it's being used and shared, obviously, the better.
For sure.
Another question here is, what's the best way to uncover audience pain points?
I can jump in here because I do this a lot. So I know I alluded to a survey in our presentation, obviously, but you don't need a huge survey budget to uncover pain points. I use a lot of like tools. Specifically, I use Gong and also ChatGPT to help me be efficient about uncovering audience pain points. So taking customer transcripts from like calls where we've either, met with a prospect and tried to uncover what they came to Sarah's for the first time to do, or, we're meeting with a client and we're trying to help them get their content to achieve a certain goal, like starting to review those transcripts will give you the ability to like uncover patterns that are happening across similar roles and things like that. And ChatGPT and AI tools like that, that's where AI can make things a little bit easier for research. So helping you quickly evaluate those transcripts. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do, listening to recorded calls, looking at support tickets. Sometimes if I have the time, looking on, LinkedIn or maybe even like subreddits related to our product, just to see how people are talking about their challenges. Again, really looking for that language that the audience is using so that I can mine it for my content.
Yeah, and so what I would add too, like Mary mentioned earlier, you don't need a big survey budget or complex months-long research project to start uncovering audience pain points or insights. I think there's a misconception that audience research has to be a huge undertaking, but you can get meaningful insights quickly and efficiently if you want to take advantage of approaching it creatively. So one example is, you could use Seros to create a lightweight quiz. These can be built really efficiently following our best practices, and these could serve two purposes. First, engagement. So they're fun, interactive, visual, which means your audience is more likely to participate. But from an insight standpoint, the responses give you direct real-time feedback about your audience, what their needs are, preferences, pain points. And once you have that data, you can use it to iterate on your content strategy, creating more targeted experiences moving forward. Now, another approach is if you're already running a third-party survey, it's possible, depending on the structure and setup, that you can embed that directly into Seros within an interactive landing page using our embedded object tool. Why you might consider doing this is surveys in isolation can often be ignored. And if you wrap a survey inside an immersive branded experience, you make it more engaging and easier to navigate. That almost always drives higher engagement, completion rates, and conversions. So key takeaway is there's a few different approaches you can take. Really, you want to meet your audience where they're at, whether it's a quick quiz or a reimagined survey experience. The goal is to make participation seamless and engaging so that you naturally gather insights you need without adding friction or complexity to it.
And speaking on a very popular topic that Mary quickly touched on before, do you use AI to help create any content? And if so, how do you make sure that it still is feeling authentic with your audience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely an AI user. I use AI every day. And I know it's very controversial, but where I've actually found a lot of use for AI is kind of like the content creation process, not necessarily that final generated piece necessarily. So like I said earlier, I use it to really quickly summarize like customer prospect calls if I want to really quickly understand what their pain points were, something like that. I also have like a GPT for the Seros voice that can be really helpful for just, kind of gut checking some of our content, making sure that it's completely within our voice and not leaning, a little jargony or what have you. But at the end of the day, I think even if you're using AI to generate content, I'm not opposed to that necessarily, but I do think that AI can't do it all for you. I'm sure people in this room who have used AI know that it still can make mistakes or, speak in a way that is very familiar to like AI speak. So just making sure that you still are, starting with your own original viewpoints, maybe using AI to help you refine that content, but not necessarily do the entire work of generating for you.
Yeah, I would echo those themes. I view AI as a tool that can help you brainstorm and iterate and streamline parts of your workflow. I do support a mix of publishers and agencies and media companies, and there's certainly a wide spectrum of adoption and comfort levels. So, some teams are experimenting heavily while others are taking a more cautious approach, which obviously both are completely valid. I do think that right now what's valuable is that we know that AI is disrupting the content creation process, but it's also changing how audiences, search for and consume information. So think about, how you use search engines. Historically, you type in some keywords, you get a list of links. But now the way in which audiences are asking about information is asking in a full kind of question QA format. So it does shift the rules a bit, and I think it is insightful and informative to evaluate, how you can evolve your content to show up in these new AI-driven discovery experiences.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm really glad you brought that up, Alexa. One thing I'd love to encourage everyone in this room is, if you are obviously concerned about AI search disrupting your content strategy, I'd really encourage you to just experiment with the tools yourself, just pick a few keywords or phrases that are tied to your product or your business, and, plug them into ChatGPT, plug them into Perplexity. That's an AI search engine that is really great. I use it every day. But yeah, pay attention to how your company's showing up here, and also, what kinds of content's being pulled in. For instance, is a query triggering a bunch of images, or is it starting to trigger like long form blogs? So look for the ways and formats that, that content's being pulled into the search engine robot, the AI LLM. And then I think that you can start to just experiment. Because again, this is a really, really disruptive force in search, but also, like everybody, we're all kind of on the same page where again, the traditional playbook's not working. So this is the time to experiment a little bit and see how your brand is showing up.
And I love that you can do that in doses too. You don't have to only use AI for everything you're doing and all of your, creations and scripting and all of like that. But again, you can test what you're comfortable with, see where you do like to use it and where you don't like to use it. But we do have
Totally.
a question here, and that is, I find in a lot of design tools, it's easy to focus heavily on the designer, which makes it feel difficult for non-technical designers to leverage the tool effectively. So how do you build effective collaboration between various roles working on the same project?
So just to make sure I understand, it sounds like this question's kind of asking how like a marketer and designer might work together on pushing that content forward.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. I came from like a bit before Saros, I definitely came from a more traditional like static content portfolio, and I was very used to the kind of like waterfall approach, right? Where I would write all of the content myself first. I take it to our creative team and say, hey, we're publishing this blog. Here's what I need you to do. That approach definitely does not work the same way for Saros content. One, like Alexa said earlier in this webinar, people aren't going to read every single word, and especially like interactive content, that might be a new kind of mindset to get your head around, is not so focused on like dense text, but more so that balance of the words on the page, but also how it's laid out, how it's designed. So now I will actually go to our creative team with an idea, and then we will have a few brainstorming sessions to ultimately decide what kind of format that content might take. And this is really great, I think, for also your creative team has a lot of great insights. So this is another way to, take advantage of their knowledge and see what they recommend. So it makes the content creation process less like siloed, I think, and more collaborative. So I would say maybe focusing on like a more pitch process. So bringing an idea to your creative team and then working together to figure that content piece out versus that waterfall approach.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add, just from a, team collaboration standpoint, obviously, the studio is where designers typically live and breathe. But if you're working, with designers and marketing team members that aren't as design tech focused, we do have our editor tool that allows you to go in and the designer can lock down certain elements, designate what's editable. There's a lot of control in that, and you can have other team members swap content, whether that's text or images, a video, all while respecting the design structure and rules around fonts and colors and branding.
Love that. Yeah, we see a lot of users work on the same project in multiple different tools, like Alexa said, in Studio and Editor. And like Mary said, a lot of it can be collaborative throughout the entire process, using markup as well for feedback. So there's a lot of back and forth in ways that not just designers can be involved in the content creation process once it's being built in Studio. There's a lot of ways, again, you can collaborate and work with, the wider team. Awesome. Well, I think that is all of the questions we have for our webinar today. So again, very big thank you to you both, Mary and Alexa, for this wonderful webinar. Thank you to everyone who joined and for those wonderful questions as well. The recording of this webinar will be sent out in a follow-up email for those that are live. It'll also be posted on Educate as well for you to go back. You can share with your team members, watch it again if you would like. But be sure to be on the lookout for more upcoming webinars on Educate. We have a lot for the rest of the year that are very exciting, and some ones coming up as well. But thank you guys so much for joining again. I hope you have a great rest of your Thursdays. Thank you both again, Mary and Alexa, for a wonderful webinar. We'll see you all at the next one.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.